Hello, everyone. Welcome to another forecast. This is Dr. Claire Moon of Aligning Light Astrology, and we're going to be talking about the weather for the second part of February. And by weather, I mean astrology weather. Um, no, I do not want to save that password. I always have the technical little thingies when I start this. So if you are joining me today, you can look over at the right-hand side of your screen if you're joining me live, and there's a chat. You can chat with me, you can chat with whoever's here, if anyone shows up. If you have any questions today, if I am skipping over an aspect or configuration or anything that you want to cover that I didn't cover, please let me know in the chat. I'm always happy to circle back around or something like that, or make sure I get it in if I haven't yet. Today, so let me run through our list, dates of interest. So some things we've already talked about and we will spend a little time reflecting on. Just the whole month of February. So the 4th of February, we had Mercury entering Aquarius on this around the first week of the year. So around the 6th, if we go by that 15-degree convention, we had Mercury beginning their disappearance in the morning sky. Saturn recently also disappearing in the evening sky. So we'll talk about the visibility stuff with them. On the 9th, we just had that Aquarius New Moon. And on the 13th, so this is something that I did cover in the last forecast for February part 1, but we went over Mars and Venus entering Aquarius on the 13th and 16th, respectively. So going forward, I'm going to touch on Venus and Aquarius again, because that's coming up here on the 16th. The sun entering Pisces on, is that the 18th? It looks like it. And then the 23rd, Mercury entering Pisces. And on the 24th, the Virgo full moon. Now, what is not on my list is Saturn, Mercury, cazimi, all happening in the same day. So Mercury Sun conjunction and Saturn Sun conjunction on the 28th of February. So at the very end of the month. So this month is really kind of, we're building up to this I'm calling it the thruple. I'm sure there are other astrologers calling it a thruple. And like, how do we not call it that? This Mercury Sun Saturn business in Pisces, really working up toward that this month. And then the other big configuration too, and this is more on like the 22nd of February, is when it perfects, but Venus and Mars conjoining in Aquarius. So those are the big things that I want to talk about today. Let me get our clock up on the screen here. Here we are, February 11th, 11:30 in the morning. I'm in beautiful, balmy Wisconsin. Let's see. So, some notes from the past. Overall kind of thoughts. So the pace for this month, I don't know about other people, and I had been mentioning this prior, but January and February of 2024 had just looked kind of, for lack of better, more eloquent words, more functional. Planets were direct. They were visible for the most part, most January. We got done with some retrogrades. So January, February, the sky was seeming to click along. And, at least in my life, I have noticed, and I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but things have really started to pick up speed and move really fast for me. And I've heard that voiced across the lands. So I don't know if that's you, but that's going on. What else about this month? So I just noted, this is just one little note, just if you're a student of astrology and you are getting used to this following of the transits. One really easy one that happens every month that I've been noticing is kind of a slam dunk, a touchdown, kind of a sure thing, is the moon meeting Mercury. So we just had this, and the thing that I notice the most on days when the moon and Mercury are meeting is that the pace of things speeds up. Mercury is kind of a fast little dude, and Mercury, especially in an air sign, lots of activity of the mind, maybe lots of planning, lots of communicating. But for me, it was just a really fast-paced, busy day. And I have been noticing that every month, and this happens every month. So look for the day when Moon meets Mercury. Let's just find it again so we know, so we can watch next month. So I like to pick out little things like that and then watch them every single month so I can start to develop a feel for like what a transit feels like. And this is why this is a lifetime sport, because it's like, oh, my next chance is in 28 days. So let's look. So that's going to happen again. We just had it on the 8th of February. If people want to think to what they were up to this last Thursday, it was a very fast-paced day. March 10th is the next one. So if you want to, maybe just on your calendar, and not to look for confirmation bias, because we can certainly do that, and that's easy to do. That's what our brains love to do as humans. But I think it's a pretty clear-cut thing if the day is fast-paced or not. I don't think we can, just kind of make that up. And this March 10th one, I mean, geez, that'll be an Aries. So it's actually a confounding variable because Aries is really fast. So then the next one, March 10th, April 8th. Oh, that one will be in Aries. May 6th. Yep. Oh yeah. Mercury in Aries. Well, I guess this next few months, maybe not a good time to run that experiment because Aries kind of confounds it, but still watch it. Watch it anyway. Maybe around that time too, just to compare, like, okay, how was that day versus the day or two before versus the day or two after? So I just wanted to throw that out as a little experiment if people were student astrologers out there and wanted something to watch that was kind of a more simple, straightforward one. All right. So what else, generally speaking, right now, and this will continue, and we'll be talking in detail about their interactions, but all the personal planets around Pluto right now, and Mercury, Mars, Venus being as close as they are to the Earth, the fastest planets that we see moving around, they are so much of they signify and reflect so much of our lived experience down here. And so when I'm talking about like our day-to-day, it's really Plutonian at this point, and it's just going to kind of get to be more and more and more, especially this week of like, February 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, around there. Really passionate. Basically, our planets, Mars, motivation, Mars, effort, Venus, desires, Venus, what we want, what we like. All of that's dialed up with Pluto. It's more intense. It just holds our focus much, much more, for better or for worse. So passions, things that you want to pursue, whether they be intellectual things, learning, projects, work, relationships, fun, whatever you're pursuing. It might be kind of like a more powerful experience over the next couple weeks. It might be more intense. So just having a good outlet, that's kind of always a good idea. I am a big kind of, you'll hear it in how I give my unsolicited advice about how to deal with these transits, is that I look for outlets for these things, sympathetic magic. If there's some kind of quote unquote channel for the quote unquote energies to move through, maybe that can give me a little bit more sense of empowerment or agency, right, over this thing. If we are kind of dipping our toe into that, determinist fate type of philosophy of like, well, this shit's going to happen. So what are we going to do with it when it does happen? I digress. Pluto stuff. We're going to be talking about that a lot. One overarching kind of just like, okay, Mercury after the 23rd, it is less skillful potentially in some of our earthen, practical, real world type of concerns. And that's a overgeneralization. I will give examples where Mercury in Pisces is great for things of the real world and the boring material landscape. But after the 23rd, Mercury, our planet of details, our planet of buying and selling, our planet of commerce, it's in the name, the exchange of goods, commerce, Mercury, exchange of ideas, travel, all of those classical kind of Mercury exchange things. After the 23rd of February, they get a little bit more circuitous, meandering, not as straightforward as Mercury in Aquarius in an air sign. So get your, like for me, okay, I chose to make my appointment with my tax lady before the 23rd. And for me, that's extra important because Mercury rules over my eighth house of taxes. So even more specifically, and this is, I'm going to just say this every month, so bear with me, but for anyone who's heard this before, but the best way to use this information is to know your rising sign. So find your rising sign and then find, like in this person's chart, this theoretical Gemini rising chart. We have the fourth whole sign house and the first whole sign house ruled by Mercury. So self, and let's just say home, family, parents, fourth house stuff. Mercury is maybe going to be more straightforward in dealing with these issues before the 23rd of February. So if you've got, say you need to sign some piece of paperwork for a land or a real estate house type of building thing, do it before the 23rd, ideally. If this person was going to get a haircut, their first house presentation, if they were going to go to a doctor or something, first house body health, I would want personally, my professional opinion is I don't want Mercury and Pisces for those things where I need cut and dry, black and white types of answers, if at all possible. So for me, that's my eighth house of taxes and collaboration and my fifth house of romance and fun, etc. So, just before February 23rd, that's the more dry, rational Mercury time. After the 23rd, it's going to be doing our taxes is going to be a little bit more, who knows? But I will do my love letter to Mercury in Pisces, which I do have one. I love them, just like in any other sign. And I'll get to that later when we talk about them. Last little thing here. Okay, Saturn and Mercury, they're now in the invisible part of their journey. We can no longer see them in the morning and evening skies. And we'll talk about what that means today. But kind of similar strategy to what we were just talking about, looking for the places, the house topics that Mercury is in charge of. Now, when we're looking at visibility of planets, and let's just fast forward then to this scenario. So, now here, I'll back up, but right now I'm on February 21st, just to illustrate, okay, Saturn's really close to the sun and Mercury is really close to the sun. And when planets get within 15 degrees of the sun, there's this mathematical convention, not always true in lived experience, might be a little different than 15 degrees, but within 15 degrees, that planet becomes it's no longer visible in the sky. We cannot see it. And so that planet's significations and the stuff that they're in charge of, so Mercury and the Gemini and the Virgo house topics and Saturn and the Aquarius and Capricorn topics, and of course Pisces, maybe some Pisces stuff too. We'll just throw that in there because that's where these planets are. Perhaps the things that are going on with these house topics are happening more quietly, more under the radar, less apparent from outward. So it's more like behind the scenes work, internal work. Let's say this is going to be like, let's say, these cazimis, these conjunctions of Mercury and Saturn with the sun. Let's say that these are realization moments of crystallized insight, like, yes, I do understand the limitations and the structures of things. And I can kind of understand a plan or how to communicate about this or how to plan around this now. All of that, might be affecting these house topics. So the realizations might be about this hypothetical Gemini risings person's first house. The realizations or understandings might be this month about fourth house home family stuff, eighth, ninth. You get the idea. So that's, these are the consequences of a lot of these transits is that, the planets are going to get together and there's going to be a vibe, but it also speaks to how things might be going in other areas of life. And so again, like when planets are invisible, they're doing their works a bit more quietly, maybe more internal versus external. And some authors do talk about it, maybe being more of a struggle, a bit more difficult. I don't always see that as the case, but sometimes it's like, okay, these Mercury and Saturn things maybe are just currently not moving forward as quickly or as easily as they might otherwise. But again, a lot of times let's just maybe focus on just the quiet and under the radar notion of it. And then later, so in like March, once these planets start to get away from the sun, then what they've been up to might become more manifest. It might become more apparent, or, those house topics might be louder at that time too. So, maybe that's one last message for this period of time when Saturn, Mercury, and their associated topics are hidden, is that maybe those topics are just quieter in general in your life. Maybe, again, this Gemini rising person, maybe matters of home just aren't as loud. Maybe they're, usually they're talking to their parents a lot, and maybe during this time, they're not talking to their parents as much. If you're like my mom, she's like, "Where are you? Why aren't you texting me?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm busy. I'm sorry." Uh, and then the first house, maybe they're just not paying as much attention to their appearance or themselves or their identity. That's just not the biggest topic at the time. That can be another manifestation of planets under the beams, as we call it. So those are kind of my overall overarching thoughts. My reflections mostly for the first 2 weeks of February have just been that it's been busy. It's been busy and active for me. So not sure if that's what's going on with everyone else, but well, N of one, Aquarius rising, everything's in Aquarius, first house, general circumstances. So when there's a lot of planets in a place, yeah, that place is going to be busy. So my general circumstances are busy. So, maybe if you're not in Aquarius rising, maybe you're not busy. I don't know. Let's see if anyone is here. Otherwise, I'm going to get into the details. Oh, wow, there's a bunch of people here. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Sophie is here. You have like a very cool, I need to figure out how to do this. People like with their handles make them very pretty and like put little like wingdings and stuff. Like I want to do that. I want some wingdings. P.S. I'm a blanket person now. I got this, a friend made this blanket for me, and so now I live in it. Um, Oh, Sophie has a really good example too. So talking about that moon with Mercury and how that can like it can be quickening, increasing of the pace. Sophie noticed that they were listening to everything at double speed. Yeah, that's a perfect explanation or perfect example. Hi, Tracy. Welcome. Hello, Holly. Welcome back. Hello, Elena. Hello, Heather. Hello, Lisa. Hello, Adam. Welcome back. Hello, everyone. Heather says, Aquarius moon mom. Adult kids typically have to reach out to me. See, and I'm the Aquarius, and I'm like, I'm fine. Like, we can talk in a month. Tell me when something interesting happens. Yeah. Oops. Oops. Lisa's having a solar return. Oh, happy solar return. Happy birthday. Oh, that's a fun question. Within 17 arc minutes of the sun. You know what, Lisa? Listen, when we talk at the end of this time today, we'll be getting into like February 28th when Saturn and Sun have their cazimi, which a medieval grade like Persian astrology cazimi is within 17 arc minutes, give or take. Hellenistic astrology, which is more kind of my angle on things, my little lens that I pick up of all the possible astrology lenses. Hellenistic astrology has it at 1 degree. A planet just has to be within 1 degree. So if that's baked into your solar return chart, then listen to how I talk about it around the 28th and then just extrapolate and be like, oh yeah, and then that's, going to be kind of baked into your year. So if Sun and Saturn, if the Sun and any planet is kind of a purification process, sometimes those conjunctions are the restart of a cycle, between those planets. I don't necessarily like Mercury's retrograde conjunction with the sun. I'm totally going into teaching mode. Sorry, everybody. Mercury's retrograde conjunction with the sun that's the restart of Mercury's cycle. Um, the sun moving through Saturn now. That's like the restart of Saturn's cycle with the sun. And so it's like this purification, this little bit of a reset button. I like to think of it as a reset button for your Saturn ruled places. So Aquarius and Capricorn. And that's for all of us. That it's a bit of that purification reset button for Saturn stuff. So while we might only deal with it for a few weeks or whatever as Saturn's creeping along, if that's in your if any configuration is in a solar return chart, that configuration gets quote unquote from, I guess, I don't know who quoted this, baked in to the year, meaning it's going to kind of reflect your year as a whole. It's going to speak to your whole year. Might be a little louder then. Now, even louder, one last little piece of nuance, because even then, not every, because a bunch of people could have that same solar return chart, but the people who it's going to be loudest for that particular Saturn thingy are those who maybe are Aquarius and Capricorn rising, who they themselves are Saturn, but more, I think, even more loudly, if the other timing techniques, like annual profections, if Saturn's a time lord. So if Saturn is your time lord, or if any planet is the time lord, then that configuration gets louder. So you'll have to watch for that. All right, cool. Hopefully that helps. Uh, Good luck with it. Especially, it can be really constructive. I love Saturn stuff, but I'm a day chart. So, Heather, no idea. All right. Yeah, you are kicking ass. That's way more than I can do. That's for sure. uh, okay, friends, let's jump into the month. Let me see if I had any other general notes. I don't think so. So the 16th, let's move ahead a few days. Today is right now the clock, but if we move ahead to the 15th, well, let's just look at the 14th and 15th. Just a little reminder for anyone who missed the last forecast. And I think this is more of like a united, I don't know, maybe I'm just being like an imperialist United States person right now, but I don't know what other countries celebrate Valentine's Day. It's a weird holiday. I complained about it last time. Um, I don't know who all celebrates it, but if you do, it tends to be where people do a lot of romantic stuff. This is not good weather for new romances. It's not great for it, but it's not a deal breaker. Like let's say you like have like just a perfect date, a first date on like around Valentine's Day or something. No pressure, right? And this is very pressurized, this Venus, Mars, Pluto business. But all this together is like classic, like love bombing, super intense, just like uber romantic, getting swept off your feet. Could be amazing, but wait, like put that baby on hold for like 2 to 3 weeks. I want to see how we're going to feel once the passion planets get away from Pluto. That is like a gravity well. It just like sucks you in sometimes. Um, Pluto is just, it does, it feels like a gravity well. Things just fall into it. Even like thinking about a rabbit hole and how our attention just gets drawn. Like if you really like reflect and try to be aware of the next time that your mind gets pulled towards something that you're like, God, why am I thinking about this so much? And like maybe it's something that's really it's drawing you because it's really pleasurable. Maybe it's something that's drawing your mind because it's really unpleasant. Either way, that is the quality of Pluto, that intense kind of pull, or that continuing to go back to it and back to it. New romances, that's not what I want to deal with. Now, I will say, as much as in general, there's a lot of, there's going to be a lot of that passionate, intense energy for what we want and pursuing what we want. And, you know, that is what it is. I'm not necessarily like, if that was like a concern, or like, say we're going to have a bunch of like Jupiter square with all this too. Jupiter square with all of the Venus, Mars, Pluto, it just amplifies it. So that desire and that passion, now it's getting this hit of optimism and this hit of vision and hope and, thinking about the future. Um, that can be so powerful, so constructive. But and the reason why I'm not actually too worried about this getting off the rails is because the sun is moving towards Saturn. So we're just constantly being faced with restraint, with limit, with, consequence and all of that. And then I also really like that Mercury, especially by the end of the month, and not saying that this is like a pleasant experience, I'm not sure, but when Mercury gets to this very end of Aquarius, it actually is going to be in Saturn's bound. And so if I bring up my complicated wheel, we can see this last 5 degrees of Aquarius or so is the bound of Saturn. And so the Mercury, our thinking planet, the planning, speaking part, uh, that is under a lot of kind of restraint and analysis and, maybe overthinking things too. So add that in with the Plutonian mental pull if you're also just like in a doubt loop or something. But I also think this keeps us on the rails. It keeps all of this kind of, like kind of churning passion, even if it's like more intellectual air sign. It's like our minds are just like on fire with all the cool stuff we could be doing, or like, probably in that area of the chart. Mercury keeps things on the level. It keeps things, okay, cool, let's make this into a logical, rational type of plan. And then again, the sun with Saturn, also a really sobering type of influence where, when I put together the Mars, Venus, Pluto, Jupiter interactions in square, and then add these more Saturnian elements, it feels like a nice kind of complement, making these skies very fertile, feeling very just constructive. It feels constructive as long as we don't go into these maybe mental churnings that aren't helpful anymore. So if you find yourself in one of those places, what I like to do is just the hardest part is always remembering to do this stuff, in my opinion, but remembering, okay, have I done enough thinking here? Like, am I getting anything else out of this right now? Or is this more my own discomfort or uncertainty or whatever that's keeping me analyzing or thinking or whatever? So, uh, okay, big digression, but that was also kind of a wider point, big, wide digression. So, okay, that's right, because I got talking about these three. Okay. So they are all going to finally be together in the same sign, Venus, Mars, and Pluto, as of February 16th. At this point, Mars will be moving away from Pluto, but now Venus will be right with Pluto. And we'll be feeling this before. We might already be starting. I know we are actually. I'm thinking like things are popping up in my mind of like, oh yeah, yup, that was Venus, Pluto, that was Venus, Pluto. So it's not like Venus needs to be in Aquarius for us to experience these Pluto things in Aquarius. We're already coming up on that. So just continue to watch these things as the next several days unfold. Um, by the 17th, Venus is already passed and then applying to Mars. And so at this point too, it's like our desires, Venus, and also our ethics. What do we like? What do we value? What values are important to us? What is worth like putting effort in for, what's worth pursuing? Venus is really able to help us answer those questions here in the Aquarius parts of our chart with this stereotypical, or not stereotypical, theoretical Gemini person. This would be about their ninth house of beliefs, but it might also be about like long distance travel or working with international organizations or something like that. And maybe values are coming under fire. Values are coming under conflict, or maybe there could be a conflict about values of some kind. Um, and how do we navigate that so that we can kind of be acting, behaving, moving toward things that are in line with our values instead of acting, behaving in ways that bring us further away from those. And again, just look to the Aquarius house topics that you have in your chart, and that'll kind of tell you where, if it is a values question or situation, that would be Venus there. So yeah, not the best vibe. It doesn't feel like the best vibes. Like, Venus usually about delight, joy, pleasure, relationship, bringing more than one thing together to make something harmonious. And she is trying to do that right now in a place that is, or at this point on the 16th, Venus is trying to do that in a place that isn't the most well-resourced. She has some dignity here by Decan, but other than that, this is not easy going for Venus. And yeah, that's what I have to say about that. Let me see if there's anything, I guess bringing back into, I know it's not by degree, but somewhat close. As much as I think things might be heavy over in Aquarius or more serious, because this is a Saturn ruled place, this Jupiter square comes in with some levity. And so let's say that, maybe there's a conflict of values or something in the middle of the month, but it's adjusting to meet some kind of opportunity or abundance, or in that kind of adjustment or internal conflict, it is happening amidst support, amidst guidance, amidst some kind of stability. So, all month and really through May 25th of this year, if we need help, we should be looking at Jupiter, Venus usually too, but she's got some things to handle. So, where is Jupiter in our chart and where is the stability or even abundance there that can help maybe with these things? I can imagine scenarios as well in the middle of the month where it could be the abundance itself that is uh, resulting in some kind of conflict of value. It's like, I can imagine just like getting a gift that you don't feel like, it should be yours, or some kind of exchange of resources that something just needs adjusting. And that's okay. Things like that need adjusting all the time, especially in a long-term relationship with people. So, this doesn't have to be like some catastrophic thing, but squares generally tend to be a little more tense. Uh, so Venus is doing that. She is gonna be with Mars all month, pretty much. So we'll talk about them a little bit more in a few days from here, because they're gonna meet on the 22nd. So we've had this energy for a while. This is going to continue throughout February. This Venus Mars pair that is about pursuing what we like, pursuing what fills us with joy, pursuing what we value, the skillful placement of effort with those things, putting effort in with relationship. I think about just Mars is putting in effort. There's action in relationship. There could be conflict. Mars conflict, Venus relationship. It could be very sexy. It could be very spicy. It depends on the circumstance. It depends on what outlets they have. But yeah, just keep that in mind. If there's like frustration about certain things, maybe we're not quite getting to where we want as quickly as we want. I think Mars Venus can sometimes also be frustration. It's that idea of you know, I'm going to put on my little like Buddhist psychology hat, neither of which I am qualified really to teach on. So just take this with a handful of salt. But as far as I understand it from my teachers, when we've got desire, which is different than love, that is not the same thing at all, but they are often intertwined and entangled. Of course they are. There's desire. I want, I want, I want. When there's desire, there's then automatically, almost inextricably, a desire to keep that thing or to have that not go away. Uh, there's like a built-in aversion to the idea of not getting what we want. It's like, if I want that, then automatically that kind of means that I don't not want that. I know that's confusing with the double negatives, but hopefully you're picking up what I'm putting down. It's like they just kind of go together. It's like this duality pair that is inextricable. And when we get that kind of thing of, oh, I got what I wanted or I didn't get what I wanted, satisfaction, dissatisfaction, that is a whole chestnut to deal with. And that chestnut is very loud right now. So, and Kyle, I am really, how I'm noticing this in me is just like a very stark lately representation of what I like and what I don't like, and being kind of irritated by things that I find silly or frivolous. Like, I just don't want to put any kind of effort into something that I don't like. Like, I'm not willing to kind of make that compromise at this point. So, that spiciness can come out here, that frustration, and that's going to, again, be here all month. That is the same exact friction that leads to constructiveness and to building and to creativity and generativeness and things like that. So all of this is a coin with two sides. Okay. We've got Venus in Aquarius. That is the point. On the 16th, the moon is getting a trine from all these planets. Sorry, my more simple wheel up here. So I'm kind of curious, like the 16th into the 17th, the moon is going to be getting a really invigorating trine from all of that Aquarius stuff, really intellectually stimulating, I think. Uh, but into the 17th, we do have a bit of a malefic enclosure of the moon. It ranges from 2 to 8 degrees of Gemini. Uh, so if we want to look at that, and granted, I'm in the central time zone, so this is going to be later in the day on Friday, well into Saturday, the more globally east you get. So Friday the 16th into 17th, Saturday the 17th, we're going to have the moon in a trine with all these Aquarius planets, but it's going to be in between the beams of Mars and Saturn. So it's getting a trine from Mars, which isn't too bad. You know, a trine from Mars or Saturn isn't the end of the world, but the moon is moving into a square with Saturn. And so it's kind of interesting. It's like the moon is getting all this really intellectually invigorating, stimulating energy from Aquarius, but it's not really able to do much with it, I don't think, at least earlier in this malefic enclosure. Um, Moon moving toward Saturn is kind of like a negatory influence. It's like saying no, it's like a rejection, or it's a hemming in, a slowing down, a delay, a burden. So, okay, on Friday evening into Saturday, we might have a bunch of ideas we want to act on or share, and we just can't for some reason. Maybe we're too busy. Maybe there's just other stuff calling our attention. Maybe we're trying to do things and it's not working out. It's getting delayed or interrupted. So just make sure, be kind to yourself. Maybe just slow down on Friday and Saturday, the 16th and 17th. And then after the moon breaks away from that, uh, then we're going to be able to feel, I think, much more of this Aquarius trine here and all of the intellectual stimulation from that, whether that's just getting a lot of cognitive heavy lifting done, whether it's having 30 tabs open on your browser. That's more of a Saturday into Sunday, 17th into the 18th kind of thing. Things start to pick up a little bit. Um, mhm. Then the moon enters Cancer. So this is going to be a little break, I think. Um, it's kind of interesting. Like it's just so air and invigorating and just a lot of stimulation in the sky. And then by the time we get to like the 18th, 19th, we get water. And so that I think is going to be a dampener maybe on some of that frenetic energy, which is great. Dampen that, please. That's a lot. It might be kind of a relief. Maybe we will just, bury our little noses into a bowl of ice cream and a blanket if you're me. I don't know. That's what I like to do when the moon is in Cancer. Stereotype, but I think it's true. Nice bright moon as well. So uh, this will be a nice little compliment to the rest of the air in the sky. A little bit more coming down of the vibes in an okay way. Uh, Happy Pisces season, Pisces babies, the 18th. The sun moves into Pisces. Moon moves into Cancer. That's a bit of a respite, but then sun into Pisces. Now, immediately upon getting into Pisces, just as it has already been experiencing, it is opposed or it's conjoining Saturn. It's meeting Saturn to have a discussion with them. And that is a bit more serious, somber um, of a tone, kind of emo in Pisces. So, not to say anything about like, and this is my reminder, I guess maybe this is something I should just say every single month, because I think it's really easy to try to extrapolate like, oh, if they're saying this about transits, then this is probably my whole ass lived experience if this is in my birth chart. And that is too oversimplification of things. Um, when something happens by transit, we only have a short amount of time to orient to it, adjust to it, harness it, hold it, whatever we want to do. Um, that's way different than having that for your whole life and becoming a master of that energy and finding the most beautiful ways to deal with it or to express it. Deal with it is a really harsh phrase. I'll take that back, but you have your whole lifetime to figure out how to hold that energy in a way that's skillful and beautiful and constructive. For people who don't have that their whole life, like, yeah, it's like we get a hot potato and we fumble it. It's not the same. So try, as much as there's a Venn diagram there. You can take, if I say, oh, watch out for Pisces, they're emo. I got a Pisces moon. You see how I am. Also, if you lived with me, you would know I am actually a little bit emo. So some of it is true, but like it's not the whole story. So I don't want people making that exact comparison and being like, Claire said that, la, la, la. Not that has not been happening, but I'm worried about it happening. This is a fear of mine. And I don't want to hurt anyone's little feelings or big feelings. But yeah, Pisces can be emo, and especially with Saturn there, and especially with Neptune there. Because it's like Neptune is imagining all of the things that could happen, and the Saturn is like, yeah, and it's like not great things, maybe. So it can get kind of emo. So what I'm going to be doing, and again, maybe this is just me projecting my own Pisces moonness, but I like to try to notice when a mood is creeping in, and I'm just noticing this mood, and maybe I can remember who's underneath that mood, and it's me. And that can lighten things up a little bit. I think things will feel a little bit more like the fun, sparkly party Pisces after February. So once we get to like March 1st, that's when the sun gets past Saturn. And I think we should feel a little less kind of like that seriousness of the moment. That's that note. What I do like about this, so sun's coming into Pisces, it's helping to shed light on, examine, understand whatever challenges are happening in Pisces for our Saturn touched areas there. Also shining light on it, a better ability to accept it, whatever is going on there, to examine it, accept it, and then to plan around it accordingly. And I think once Mercury gets in here, that will be a lot of what's going on. I think a lot of this throuple of Sun, Mercury, Saturn, and Pisces is really like getting into whatever challenges are in that house for you and coming up with some kind of means of communicating about it, thinking about it, understanding it personally, or acting on it. But yeah, it could be really positive. I like the idea of just that peace that can come with acceptance, whether or not, that doesn't mean that it's a happy kind of tone, but acceptance at least can have us releasing that tension that can go along with difficult feelings. Pisces can definitely help with that, especially with Saturn in there. Because Saturn is that realism. And so we are accepting what is really real, hopefully. On the 19th, so okay, 18th, Sun enters Pisces. Is there anything else I need to say about that? I mean, yeah, there is actually. So when the Sun was in Aquarius, not great for their dignity, just because the Sun usually likes to be in Leo. It has a lot of congruence. It rules Leo. The Sun, it's associated with, the summer in the Northern Hemisphere. The Sun currently is and will be until the 18th in a place that is the winter in the Northern Hemisphere. The Sun, kind of that shining, like surveilling kind of body that is, we can definitely see it. It's definitely there. In Aquarius, you get that Saturnian objective, detached notion where the self is no longer the main focal point. And so the Sun being in a place where it is not the main focal point, where it is not necessarily resourced as well as it would like to be, Aquarius Sun can have its own kind of challenges. But when the Sun gets into Pisces, now it is still in a Saturn decan and it's with Saturn. So I don't think it's going to be like on the 18th. I don't think it's going to be as vivid of a shift as maybe we're used to feeling. I think it's still going to feel pretty Saturny until March. But then now, especially after that, it's like we do have a Sun that is ruled by Jupiter instead of being ruled by Saturn. And when the Sun is in Pisces, its ruler can actually see it. So that was another challenge, was that when the sun is in Aquarius right now, Saturn can't see any of these Aquarius planets. Saturn cannot help any of, like, we might have all of these big ideas and big, thoughts and passions and thinking about all the stuff we want to do and, act on. Um, Saturn is not able to resource those folks the way that they could be otherwise. Saturn isn't, able to give them kind of guidance about how to navigate that territory that they're in right now. Versus when the sun gets into Pisces, now the ruler of Pisces, Jupiter, will be able to see them, will be able to help them out a bit more in navigating this terrain than they've had. So, emo, sure, but is the sun in general maybe better equipped to follow its will, feel like it's, moving towards something that it cares about that has meaning and purpose? I feel like that will feel a little bit more the case versus just this serious trying to get by with what I have. Especially into March, I think we'll be feeling that soft Pisces-ness ruled by a benefic instead of a malefic. Right. And then we get a benefic enclosure that is really long. It's like 50 some hours. And so a lot happens these days too. So it's really interesting because we get this conjunction between Mars and Venus during this time. That's like more on like the 22nd. Uh, that's just kind of a lot. What else? There was something else happening too. But whatever it is, we're kind of nestled in between benefics. And when the moon is nestled in between the rays of the benefics, it stabilizes things a little bit. And so at the best, it can just be this very nice pocket of time where things just seem to work better, where things seem to work out better or be better received. If stuff is tough and you end up in a moon benefic enclosure, I feel like it is a short window of time where that difficult circumstance around you feels a little less difficult. Maybe you get a little rest from it, a little respite, a little break, or things just don't go as shitty as they normally do. So, or have been, I should say. That is from the 19th to the 22nd of February from 9 degrees of Cancer. And P.S., I'm not using the outer planets for this. If anyone's like, yeah, but it runs into this and it runs into that, I'm not using the outer planets if that's the case. From 9 degrees of Cancer until 6 degrees of Leo. And so I'll show you what that looks like. So we have on the 19th, 6 degrees of Cancer moon. Burp, burp. They are going to have, wait, is this the malefic enclosure? No, this is right. It's separating from a sextile with Jupiter. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not going to be interacting with any of these Aquarius planets while it's in Cancer. It's already past Sun and Saturn. And then we can watch the moon. They're going to move through Cancer. And now when they get into Leo, the first planet they interact with that's not an outer planet is Venus. And so we get an opposition with Venus. So moving from sextile with Jupiter to opposition with Venus, that's that pocket of time between the 19th and the 22nd of February. So whatever kind of intense stuff is happening with Aquarius, like 19th through the 22nd, it's kind of a nice little bubble wrap around us, I think. Little duct tape, if you will. Kind of dialing down any kind of threat assessment that we might have, that it's not as serious. And then on the 20th, so this goes back to what I was saying about like, okay, lots of passion in the sky, lots of like mind going, thinking, planning, making these castles in the sky. I don't think we're going to like get into an obsessive rabbit hole and get ourselves in trouble or like, sleep through our alarm clock because we stayed up all night watching conspiracy theories. I don't think much of that's going to happen, even though it could, just because Mercury is controlled by Saturn so much right now. And the sun is also very Saturn influenced. So that's Saturn restraint, that's Saturn bound, healthy boundaries, containers, just taking that passion and energy and having some kind of structured container for it. Really, it just sounds very helpful. So that's going on more on the 20th. We are getting Venus and Mars, I mean, they're within the same degree, and now they're within 3 degrees of this square with Jupiter. So, just to pick this apart, so Mars square Jupiter is usually so invigorating. It is like Mars, that effort, and then Jupiter, that kind of like optimism and belief that it's going to work out. And so, very willing to run into battle, very willing to say yes. Jupiter is yes, Jupiter is affirmation. Um, but we can be impulsive. So squares are of the nature of Mars. So let's add in a little bit more like, okay, there could be tension about moving after this goal that you have or this big vision. There might be some adjustment that needs to happen. And so if we're a bit too impulsive, we can get ourselves into trouble. If we're overextending and saying yes to a bunch of stuff that, we don't have capacity for, that we might not have capacity for a few months down the road. Yeah, we need to watch out for that. But overall, again, I think this is just really constructive. And then Venus and Jupiter, because Venus is going to hopscotch over Mars, going to leapfrog over Mars here. Oh, we are in a leap month. And then Venus is going to be moving into Jupiter. So Venus and Jupiter square, that is like, two of our happy planets, the planet of delights, joys, pleasure, love, relationship, and Jupiter, goodwill, affirmation, belief, abundance, growth, all of those things, stability, both planets kind of having a hand in making stable situations. Now, when we get the nature of Mars, with that Mars tension with so much abundance, maybe it's too much of a good thing here. Maybe it's too many friends, too much busyness, too many activities. Mars is effort and going after something. And so if I'm going after pleasure too hard, well, I could hurt myself maybe. Or if it's that stereotypical eating too much candy and getting a tummy ache, like very classic Venus Jupiter square gone amiss. So I can imagine, especially, if Pluto's coming in, there's power dynamics, people are asking you for things or want you to do things or stuff. Make sure your yeses are coming from a genuine, sincere place that is also like knowing what's sustainable for you and not being pressured or peer pressured by like Pluto or a sense of urgency. Mars can impart a sense of urgency sometimes that can get us in trouble too. So again, this is just like such a kind of exciting sky. I'm very curious to see what it's about, but I can see the potential for overextension and kind of overindulgence around the 20th, 21st, 22nd of February. That's right, though. Sometimes we need to do that too. Then I didn't really talk about the moon. Just kind of a little note. The moon applies to this nice little trine to Neptune at the end of Cancer. So this is on like the end of the day on the 20th, like Tuesday into Wednesday, late Tuesday into Wednesday morning. We've got the moon trine Neptune. And that just feels so restful and chill and like a little bit of a respite if the rest of life has been a little bit busy or hectic or anything like that. This is still within that benefic enclosure, so that's great. And then the moon is going to enter into Leo on early on the 21st, later on the 21st on Wednesday, the more globally east you are from me. And then we get this moon opposite Pluto, opposite Venus, Mars. And so just kind of pinging that whole thing. So whatever's going on across, on the 21st, 22nd of February, look at the Leo Aquarius axes. So for this hypothetical Gemini person, they might have a lot of busyness and action those 2 days on the 21st and 22nd with their communicating, educating, traveling, learning, whether it's short distance travel and doing a bunch of errands, whether it's a lot of classes, any of those third, ninth house topics, or just busy with I don't know, spiritual, religious matters, busy with extended relatives. Yeah, lots of action there. And with that fire moon, really wanting to act on stuff, fire compels us to act. So it's like yeah, there's some Saturnian influence telling us all the limitations and kind of the ways we need to slow down. This moon on the 21st and 22nd doesn't really want to. And it's applying to square with Jupiter. Yeah, so this is actually, 21st, 22nd looks pretty invigorating. So I would rest if it were me, like rest on like the 19th, 20th, and then 21st, 22nd, go for it. Might have a little bit more fire under your buns to do stuff. Okay, let's see. I think let's talk about this Venus-Mars conjunction. But before I do, let's see if anyone has any questions or concerns. Hey, thanks, Sophie. I'm gonna do that. I wanna have fun. I wanna have fun fonts. I like fun fonts. Yeah, Heather, if you've got Pluto on an angle, um, in your birth chart, I assume what you're saying. Yeah, you kind of, that's the thing too. Like anytime there's like a transit happening where you're like, oh no, or like you're getting overly excited about it, look in your birth chart and like if that's something you have natally, it might not be as earth-shattering to you or exciting or vivid because you're like, yeah, this is just my whole life all the time. Like I don't know why everyone's getting so excited about this. It definitely matters if you're dealing with those things in your birth chart regularly. Yeah, Nikki Nice. Meandering essays for Moon and Pisces. And, maybe that's one thing too when Mercury enters Pisces, meandering essays. Um, but yeah, isn't that, yeah, that is is that what's today? Because I remember looking at this and being like, why, I haven't had like an open schedule to be able to elect these types of live events like I used to. And so I'm just doing them whenever, like no matter where the moon is. And I'm like, oh, cool. Moon, Neptune, and Pisces. I should be very straightforward today, right? Not at all. Big digressions shall ensue. Moon is in Pisces. Yes, Heather, bad romance for all of that 14th, 15th of February weather around Pluto. Not my first choice for first dates. All right, so let's go back to this Venus Mars conjunction. So I also want us to take a little history trip back. They met last June, July of 2023 in Leo. So if we want to think like what was happening the last time, what was happening back in June, July of 2023 in the Leo part of our chart, not Aquarius. And how might that relate to what is going on now in Aquarius? So I just want to show you. Oh, no, too far back. There we go. Or did they not meet? No, that's what it was. They came together in Leo, but they didn't quite meet. That was what was interesting about this story. I'm just going to go manually. So last summer, they were together, they were co-present, but they didn't meet. But now they're meeting. So that is why I'm wondering about a connection. It's like what started back then that never got wrapped up. And now it's like maybe there's something about that's some loose ends are getting wrapped up, or something is coming to fruition, or maybe something is coming back around again. Um, I'm not sure, but I just want to highlight again, like this was this last summer. And then what happened is Mars sped off, Venus did a retrograde. And so she slowed down. And so they never really ended up meeting, but now they are. And so that's why I just wanted to make that connection. So if we want to do a homework assignment and look back, it might be about that. Uh, I do wonder, Venus, two things here. Like if I'm thinking, okay, when two planets are in a conjunction and I'm trying to figure out if, or, I'm not always picking things apart this much, but like which planet might be louder. So we look at their condition, who might have more resourcing or more of an effective presence in a place. And so if I get my complicated wheel and we look at where these planets are, we see Venus has a little bit more dignity than Mars. She's in her own decan. I want to say, is she in her own bound then too? Let me check. Maybe it's at 7 degrees. Yeah, at that point, yeah, yeah, we got to wait till 7 degrees. So at least from degree, 0 through 6, Venus is in her own decan. After 7 degrees, she's in her own decan and her own bound. So I almost wonder if Venus is a little louder in this pair and softens things more and also makes it much more about um it's yes, we want to pursue, yes, we want to put in effort, but the values and the relationships are what's more important, maybe. So um versus like sense of urgency, speed, action over values, maybe willing to cut some corners in the relationship or values department. That's not as much the case, I think. And then also Venus leapfrogs over Mars. So we can see it here. She ends up on right now she's on the left side of Mars. If I animate this chart a little further, we see her jump over to the right side of Mars. So she is then overtaking and leading after him, or leading him basically. And so moving through the sky first, kind of parting the space-time, whatevers. And with Venus leading, that also makes me think maybe Venus is a little bit more louder in this interaction, and that softens all of it. So, there's several things in the sky where as much as Pluto is really dialing up the intensity on some things, a lot of the rest of the sky makes it so that like my threat assessment of this Pluto stuff goes from like a threat level orange to a threat level yellow for the Saturn reasons and these Venus reasons. So more just on I really feel like this is a constructive time, a productive time, even if it's a little intense. Okay. So then again, after Venus leapfrogs over Mars here, then she is applying directly to a square with Jupiter. And yeah, this is nice. This is the very beginning of the 22nd, like in the wee hours in Central Time Zone, more into the day on Thursday on the 22nd. We get the end of that benefic enclosure of the moon. The moon leaves that, but then we also have this beautiful square between Jupiter and Venus. Lots of goodwill, again, like bringing together pleasure, delight, values, what we do value, relationship with opportunity, with growth, abundance, stability, goodwill, sharing, caring. It's very good times, good people. Just don't overdo it. Otherwise, you might eat too many. Using my own life, chocolate chips from the bag and getting a tummy ache because that's what I do. When you give me a bag of chocolate chips, I just eat them. No cookies being made over here. And then we've got the 20. Yeah, just dial down the impulsivity. Anytime there's a square, we just don't want to be impulsive with it. That nature of Mars can be like, oh, there's tension in here. I want it now, or I want it big. And it's like, it didn't need to be that fast or that big. Chill. But overall, it's nice. It's really nice. And then on the 23rd, so again, just to reflect or repeat what I was saying earlier, if you've got logistical, dry, practical Mercury stuff to do, or if you really want that dry, rational, practical quality put toward your Virgo or Gemini house topics, like for me in my eighth, my taxes, I'm getting all that stuff done before the 23rd of February. After the 23rd of February, Mercury turns into their artistic, spiritual, it's more about the parable and not about the journalistic details after Mercury gets into Pisces. Some of my favorite people are Mercury's in Pisces. One of them is another astrologer, CV Henriette. They do astrology talk. That's cute little astrology talk show. And they have a Mercury in Pisces, and they just posted on their threads or something. It was so funny. And they said, like, the hardest thing about interviewing is that they want to ask them all the questions all at once. Mercury in Pisces. And it also reminds me of, like, my own kind of, this is maybe my own Pisces moon, but highlighting everything on the page. It's like everything is important, everything is meaningful. How do I discern what of all these details and this big soup of details is the meaningful, important bits? But that's where Mercury in Pisces can actually, okay, again, this is an example where if you've got a Mercury in Pisces and that's what you have for this life, you're going to get probably pretty good at using that. And so I see, like, one of my favorite examples of Mercury in Pisces is like scientific illustration and that ability to take so much information, maybe all of these dry Virgoan or Gemini disparate little pieces that in Pisces, we can have meaning and coherence and bringing a lot of things together into an overarching meaning. So you see that, like, I don't know if anyone, has read scientific papers or things like that, especially like, I come from more biology, chemistry land. It's pretty amazing to me how whoever that illustrator is, they can take like 10 pages of really complex information and distill it down into a picture with little shapes and colors. And because of those shapes and colors and how they're arranged, I can figure out what the heck that paper is about visually. That can be a really cool kind of thing. The parable, which is a story that has a meaning, but the details of the story aren't important, like the Good Samaritan or whatever. The point of that story is that you like is a guy who's helping people. You help people. It's a Good Samaritan. It doesn't matter who they are, what time it is, where they are, whatever. The overarching meaning of the story is what's important. So in Jupiter, yeah, like knowledge with a capital K, truth with a capital T or whatever. But it's like there still might be some liberties taken with that, in the detailed department. That's the difference between Virgo and Pisces. So when, you know, Mercury is in here now, it's less about that, maybe journalistic, dry integrity and more like, let's just get the point across. So that's what Mercury does here best. It's good at putting that language piece toward symbolism. So symbolic language, the ability to read and interpret symbolic language, omens, maybe there'll be more of those kind of synchronicity things when Mercury's in Pisces. I'm not sure. But certainly, like, communicating in a direct way can be more difficult. Communicating in a really detail-oriented, concise way can be more difficult. It doesn't mean they can't do it, but it takes a little bit more honing and time. I knew like a chemist who had this and took a long time to write stuff, but wrote stuff really well. Artistic spiritual planning, communicating about artistic spiritual stuff. This is a very idealistic, romantic place. I think about Pisces, just a little thing about Pisces. So it's water, but it's water it's under the auspices of Jupiter. And if water is connection, so all these watery places and connection, we think about, and this was totally inspired by listening to Ram Dass talk about love and relationships. And he was talking about, different ways of being open and connected with individuals in the world. And what this inspired me, astrologically speaking, is looking at all these water places as places of possible connection and under the auspices of their ruler, though. So connection under the auspices of the moon in Cancer, we're connecting in order to nourish, to care, to grow, to protect, like that kind of necessary codependence between mother and child or parent and baby, like need to have like some skin contact, right? Like that's some Cancer stuff, connection in the name of nourishment and needs. And then we've got connection in Scorpio under the auspices of Mars, separation, motivation, assertion, drive. Like, how do I connect when I am moving toward this thing? How do I connect when I'm aware of all of the separation and strife that can happen? Mars and Saturn both play a hand in fear. Mars can certainly play a hand in fear and protectiveness. So how do I, defense versus offense? So how do I connect when I am aware of all of the complexity of things? And how do I connect when I'm aware of like people's motives and how complicated that can be? And it gets this, as it kind of explains the whole relational kind of field of awareness that scorpionic people can have. It's a, and it also that deep, deep connection that if you're Scorpio and you're aware of all the things that can go wrong in connection, that means you have to be braver than anybody else to connect with others. And you are. Scorpio is like the bravest sign because it knows and it still does it anyway, very strategically and carefully. So we can still get deep connection. And sometimes it is so intimate and squishy and deep because that person had to go through so much courage to get there, bravery to get there. But then Pisces, what is it like to connect under the auspices of Jupiter? It's like I always say, like, what if we were all just generous? What if we were all just generous to our greatest capacity with each other all the time? Like, very idealistic, but like shit would totally work, right? Like, it's when you see two people, two friends, two business partners, two lovers, whoever, and they just give to each other. And there's not a lot of like overthinking about giving too much, or not to say we don't have healthy boundaries, yay, Saturn. But Pisces itself, just Pisces in a vacuum, it is that beautiful, idealistic, oh, what if we just all were open and generous with each other? And we can see that kind of ability to then be accepting, just open, maybe too open, forgiving, all of those beautiful kind of spiritual qualities that Pisces can have. So, long story short, now we got all these Pisces planets. So when we look at like the house topics that you might have in Pisces, how can you connect with others in a way that is generous but measured, in terms of like sustainability over time? And I think part of, and this is something I've harped on so much. So by February 24th, we get to the Virgo full moon. And I'm going to say the same thing I've said about all the other Virgo full moons. I'm just going to recycle. And I've been saying it's like that opportunity for the moon to look at all of the details that and all the processes, the tediousness of all the day-to-day regular work to make the Pisces dream or vision happen. And that's more in kind of this, okay, I'm creating something, I'm building something, I'm restructuring something here with the hope that I can make it even better. Now, let's say you're really struggling in the Pisces part of your chart. Let's say, okay, I'm just going to use myself as an example, my money stuff, my resources, my skills and my talents and my time, all of my resources that I have. I have had mad imposter syndrome since Saturn got into my second house. And I've been trying to take a bunch of classes and just like drive hard at trying to improve my skills because I'm feeling like not competent enough. So let's say I'm feeling like that. I'm feeling like, oh, my resources, I don't know. I need to shore them up. Then Virgo full moon on the 24th can show us, okay, here's all the little details. Like if I really want to shore up some of my skills, that means I have to put in like 2 hours a week in this, and that is non-negotiable. And I don't care what day it gets done. It's a flexible structure because we're in Pisces. We're in a mutable sign, but it's got to get done. And I think with Mercury in here now, with Sun and Saturn, they're helping this kind of cognating process, planning, maybe communicating. Maybe I have to tell people, hey, I got to take this class 2 hours a month or whatever, so I can no longer do this thing with you. I'm sorry. Or like we can adjust. I have to adjust, things. So putting that voice to some of these issues, putting that brain to some of these issues. I think that's a lot of what Mercury is going to be doing in Pisces starting on the 23rd. And then it's going to really be highlighted February 24th when we get that full moon in Virgo. Just lighting up this whole axis. So whatever houses you have across Pisces and Virgo, that full moon is sure to help illuminate, maybe give some insight that we're already kind of last week of the month. So, like, if you are having things in Pisces and Virgo in your life that you're not sure about how to navigate it or what to do about it, I'm very curious if the last week of this month doesn't shed some light on how to do it, how to deal with it, how to whatever those areas. Um, I already know for me, this is about my money stuff. I'm getting my taxes done this month. I am internally reconsidering a lot about where I put my time and how and with who and healthy boundaries around that because I'm tired. I've had to start wearing concealer again because my under eye bags are showing. So that's my red flag that like, yeah, probably need to think about my resource management a little bit better. Um, so look at those house topics for you, and I'm sure that's what it's going to be about. Last thing with that is that Mercury, who rules over this moon in Virgo, Mercury can see. I mean, they might be far away, but they can still see. And as Robert Hand, I heard him say this, maybe other people have said this, the only thing worse than like an opposition or a square is no aspect at all. So I just like to see an aspect, honestly, sometimes. It's like, okay, we can work with that. It might be feel unreconcilable, a little tense, might have to balance or, experiment a little bit with these places, but we still can though. We have that opportunity to try a little easier. Oh, what else? Uh, I also like to usually look at the last and next aspect that the moon makes before and after the full moon, I guess. So we'll look at that. It's the last aspect it makes is with Mercury. So there's an opposition between the moon and Mercury. So on the 24th of February, when this full moon gets going, the first conversation the moon is having is with Mercury. Okay, what are the details? What's going on in there? What, boots on the ground. What's going on there in Pisces? Mercury, can you please sort out a little bit of these details? And then we're thinking about them, maybe thinking about them more creatively than we have before in Pisces. Then the moon goes full. Then when it's coming out, its next aspect is going to be in opposition with Saturn, which is a tough aspect. It is probably some kind of reality check. Could be okay, got the details. Now, here are the limitations. Here are the things you got to work around. Here are the sober, realistic conversations that need to happen about these topics. And we're going to be serious and, think about the long term, Saturn says, is this sustainable in the long term? All of that going on the 24th. But then no, after that, then there is a little rainbow, and then the moon runs into a trine with Jupiter. And so, okay, we're back to Taurus and asking ourselves, well, what from Taurus area of my life can help? You know, what from this person's 10th house? If you're a theoretical Leo rising or something like that, maybe there's some tension across your resources and how you share yourself with the world, or collaborations, or something to do with money or resources, getting needs met. Maybe Jupiter in that person's 10th house of career and life path, maybe there is just a general stability in their career life path such that they can weather whatever this kind of readjustment is that's needed, or kind of whatever, weather whatever realization this is across the second or the eighth. But there's something about the career that's helpful here, whether it be stability or abundance or goodwill. Maybe it's I can imagine the Leo rising with a bunch of work colleagues and collaborating with work colleagues. And, maybe there's some back and forth and some give or take with that and some compromise that needs to happen. But overall, between them and in the career, there's this kind of goodwill that permeates and allows, or solutions, or just the resources to be like, okay, well, maybe, they can't do it, but I know this other person and they can, or something like that. So definitely Jupiter helping out with this full moon. Now, what is not really a huge part of this full moon is all of those passion players over in Aquarius. So it's like, this is a really kind of practical, I feel like, sober, realistic discussion about what is reasonable and sustainable. And at the same time, like this is not taking into account all of the preferences and values and desires and actual motivations. Like it's not taking that into account, um, at least on this day, on the 24th. So that was a part of this. Yeah, sober conversations, but there's help. Uh, Moon meets a trine. Oh yeah, the day after. So on the 25th, then we've got the moon meeting a trine with Uranus. So it's like it gets that trine from Jupiter and then a trine from Uranus. And that's almost like, okay, well, here's a solution, or here's a, a happy kind of insight or a some I feel like sometimes this trine with Uranus can give us little bursts of insight or flashes of inspiration that are solutions that can be helpful. So I like that this happens after that kind of heavy full moon. And then the moon gets into Libra by the 26th, and then it gets back in touch with all of the preference motivation stuff. Um, we're really now this last big configuration of the month being the thruple, the Piscean thruple. I'm very curious about what this is going to be. It feels like just like a crystallization of understanding. It's like Saturn, like solidifying, crystallizing what is that broader perspective in Pisces, and Mercury really bringing in that thinking piece with it too. So, uh, yeah, I guess maybe last thing before we get into all the cazimis, again, just thinking about the sky as a whole and like the sky is an admixture of things. As much as, that this conjunction happening in Pisces might be, I don't know, just a little bit more serious. And as much as like the Saturn ruled planets also kind of serious, uh, I do just like the air being mixed with the water. Like I like that it's not all just like earth, water. We do have a little bit of levity, lightness, nimbleness afoot, which I don't know. I just on vibes, it feels like a nice admixture of things. Uh, so on the 28th, we get the first cazimi, and that is Mercury meeting the sun. And I guess maybe I should back up too, because I really didn't talk about visibility or like condition or anything. So Mercury on the 23rd of February is losing a bit of dignity. It's also under the beams of the sun and combust and moving into the sun. It's a really difficult point for Mercury in their cycle in terms of doing all of the little like capitalistic things we expect Mercury to be able to help us do. They're just not as good at it here necessarily in this position. Really good at like the oracle querent situation, really good at the symbolic language, but yeah, if I'm doing my taxes, this is not great at all. This is like I can imagine it being me trying to find receipts and I just can't find them. I just can't find the receipts. I just can't seem to make some headway in what I need to do. I don't quite have all the information necessarily. So, bringing together realization, but I do want to wait until the end of the month though to see how it's going to turn out. I want to see what happens after like Mercury has this cazimi, what happens when they get out of the beams and get visible again. But for now, more of, too, Pisces can be more internalized, and planets that are invisible can be more internalized or hidden if we pluck that out from modern astrology in like the medieval times. Planets under the beams were often conditions that were more hidden in nature or not quite as visible, maybe more pernicious. But in any event, it is hidden. But during the cazimi, during the exact Mercury Sun conjunction, we get this little area of time where it's like this purification of Mercury. And they actually are given some of this solar will to do their work with. So like Mercury is our voice. When it's conjoined with the sun, it's like my will, what I want is coming through my voice. Or my will, what I want is being imbued into my planning and my thinking thoughts. Like it's about me and what I actually want and what I actually feel willed or called toward doing. And so I think that's a great recentering process for Mercury and Sun during this conjunction. Um, Looking for the realizations. I think that's what a lot of astrologers say when we talk about cazimi. I hear a lot of us giving that same kind of advice of like, yeah, write down your ideas. If you're having some aha moments, write them down. We might be, sometimes we're so busy, really hard to remember, even if we think, oh, there's no way I'm going to forget that. you know, Sometimes it's better to just write it down. It's a purification for the Gemini and Virgo parts of our chart and the house topics in there. So really especially focus on Pisces, Gemini, Virgo during the 27th, 28th for the details. So the Mercury cazimi perfects at 2:42 a.m. Central Time. That again is on the 28th of February, 2:42 a.m. Central Time. So that's going to be, I mean, if you're a astrological magic practitioner, that's not a very convenient time. However, if you are more in the global east, so that'll be more in the middle of your day and much more accessible if you're like in, I don't know, literally any other time zone that's like further east than the Atlantic Ocean. The 28th will actually be some good days maybe to use for astrological magic if you're doing that. The last cazimi that was the rebirth of Mercury. This is the middle of Mercury's cycle right now because they're going direct through the sun. The beginning of this Mercury sun cycle started last December 22nd, 2023 at 0 degrees of Capricorn. So this is another little homework where I'm not sure. I don't even know if I've done this myself to try to think about what's being brought together now. What kind of mercurial things did we recommit to or begin last December, just a couple months ago? And now that we're in the middle of this cycle, kind of how's it going? And how is that tying in with Pisces? So that's a lot of synthesizing to try to do to bring together like, two sets of house topics and compare, okay, 2 months ago versus now, how do those house topics look? Might not be anything there that's worth noting. Maybe you're not in a Mercury ruled year or anything like that, but worth noting. And Saturn cazimi, so later Central Time, this is in the afternoon Central Time. So this will be later in the day and then into the wee hours on the 29th of February. But Saturn cazimi, 3:25 p.m. Central Time at 9 degrees of Pisces. And at this point, Mercury has moved past them and is going to be on the other side. So here, now we've got Saturn and Sun coming together, and Mercury is already on their way away, but still, I mean, in the same room at the very, like, right. I mean, they're like right next door. He's in the meeting. He's at the board table or whatever. But he's had his conversation with the sun. Mercury has had their conversation with the sun. Saturn is now having their conversation with the sun. And so when Saturn is combined with our will, okay, what structures am I willing? How do I want this to work? How do I want this to operate? What are the limits and the edges of this? What are the boundaries within this, around this? Maybe insight about that. Insight about authority, like thinking about, okay, if Saturn is like that person who has put in the time, the experience, has the mastery, has the authority on the matter, how can we step into our authority on these matters? How can we kind of step into our mastery or experience and be like, especially if like the older you are, the more relevant this is, I believe as well. Just like, yeah, I do have experience with this. I do understand these matters, and I'm going to speak to that and embody that. I think I'm always kind of curious and a little excited about cazimis, not in a way where I have expectations around them, where I'm hoping to get some little nugget of gold, but I have just observed many, many times now that the cazimis are moments where things do seem to get a little bit more simplified It's like that purification of the fire of the sun, just like it burns away the bullshit. And I am left with more of a clear view of what those other planets' topics really are and what they're talking about. Um, I like to think of sun like solar type of knowing. Like there's lots of different ways of knowing, lots of different types of knowing. And solar knowing feels like that really simple, bare knowing that like Zen Buddhist people talk about when it's like the suchness of things or like, that everything has like a nameless quality. It's like my teacher Joseph Goldstein, he uses the example of like looking at a tree. And when I look at that tree, my eyes take in those shapes and colors and my brain is like I already know tree before my brain has said that word to me. And way before Mercury has come in and labeled it a pine tree, a beautiful pine tree. Judgment, Saturn, a judgment comes in about it. Saturn loves to judge things. So before all of that, the sun, all on its own, knows shit, but it knows like this very bare understanding of something in its core way. So then, how can I have that bare knowing about my judgment? How can I have that bare knowing about what my boundaries are or aren't and what they need to be? In that way that even goes below, underneath, before like all of these names and labels and crazy like, I don't know, habit patterns of mind we have around these things. Cazimis, really good for that. Really good for getting into that kind of bare knowing place. That's how I explain it. I don't know if any of that makes sense. Let's see if there's anything else. The restart button. I had mentioned this earlier. So for Saturn especially, because Mercury is more in the middle of their cycle, so I don't think about this as like, yeah, it's a purification, a bit of those topics, but it's not like the reset button, I don't think, for Gemini, Virgo stuff, but does feel like a reset button for Saturn ruled stuff. So looking at the Aquarius and the Capricorn parts of our life, okay, how's that? Let's do a little audit, inventory, be like, how does this place look? Do I want to keep running it this way? Maybe not. Maybe we see more clearly how we want the Aquarius Capricorn parts of our life to look, and we make a new commitment to that. Oh, that's right. Saturn is also commitments. So the sun and Saturn coming together, what are we committing to? Maybe in the Pisces area, maybe we're bringing in Leo stuff, the topics from the Leo place. So like this theoretical Leo rising person, I would say, okay, what are they committing to regarding themselves and how they share literally themselves with the other? This would, that's how I always describe the eighth of how we share ourselves with the other. But when the luminary is in there or a luminary is in there, it really becomes personal. Like it is my time, my effort, my emotional labor, not just, you know. So maybe there's an opportunity to recommit to whatever structures, boundaries, experiences that you know about. How can we recommit to those? Uh, that's it. I think that's it. I just wanted to add in that piece about commitment. There might be committing to stuff. Uh, Mercury is in a sextile with Jupiter at this time. All these people are. So that's something to consider. So as much as like, okay, serious discussions, realizations in Pisces with those house topics, Jupiter is able to help a lot with this sextile, supportive. Again, we might have these Pisces things happening, but in Taurus, like what house topics there are stable, abundant, fruitful. Give me a soft landing place, a bit of a safety net, maybe, to deal with, navigate, embrace whatever's going on in Pisces. Moon is bright at this time still, too. It's in Libra. Yeah, and I guess on the water note, of course, water, we can have emotions, we can be emotional, we can just have a lot of feelings. That doesn't mean that we can't also have a mind, a heart mind that is somewhat still chill and being just open to it all, you know, no expectations, only possibilities. Equanimity, equanimity, being equanimous, being magnanimous, being dispassionate, which is probably not, no, that's probably not going to happen. This doesn't feel very dispassionate. But I do like that the moon is in an air sign here on the 28th when all of these cazimis are happening, because it's just such an intellectual kind of cool-headed, level-headedness that we can have amidst maybe some emotions about stuff, which is totally normal. And then final little thing here, the month ends out. We do have a 29th of February this year, and the moon is in Scorpio, then having an opportunity to have a trine with all of these Pisces planets. And so, with all that, maybe thinking, planning, seriousness, the moon comes into Scorpio and can strategize. Now that strategy brain comes online and says, all right, so let's get driven about how we're going to move through, around, with, work with whatever is going on in Pisces. Water, emotions, feelings, but I like to think of Scorpio, I think we don't speak enough about how it is that quieter, slower Mars energy. So what is quiet, slow Mars? It is taking its time and making actions. It is thinking through those actions pretty carefully, maybe even to the point of paranoia. So be careful about that. But it is very strategic. And so I think it'll be helpful in that way at the end of the month. And then I guess moving more into March, which we'll of course talk about later, but now we're going to get these Pisces planets moving away from Saturn. Now they're out of Saturn's decan. I'm hoping that after the thruple, the triple conjunction, that things lighten up, that there's a little bit more levity, that we can feel more of the Jupiterian kind of buoyancy in March with the rest of this Pisces stuff. And again, as we get into the end of February, then even too, we have Mercury now applying toward Neptune. So this is where we extra, if there's logical, rational, detail-oriented things like fine print that we need to be reading, really just remembering to read the fine print at the end of February. And we'll talk more about that in March. But all right, that's what I have for everyone. Let me see what comments, final questions we have. If there was anything that you wanted to discuss that we didn't. Yeah, I like what you said, Heather, about, I'm guessing you were talking about like that Venus-Mars-Pluto business and thinking about Venus being more taking the lead than Mars. And Heather saying Venus is more willing to compromise and negotiate the how of these changes, how those changes can work best for everyone. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And maybe one last note too on Aquarius, and this is coming straight from that Hellenistic lens that kind of rejects the 12-letter alphabet. I don't think Aquarius is a humanitarian. I'm an Aquarius rising. I have Venus in Aquarius. I don't think we're humanitarians. I'm sure that's going to upset a lot of people who have hung their hat on that, but it's a Saturn place. Saturn does not care about feelings. I would say Saturn a lot of times doesn't even care that much about people. It's not the sun. It's not the moon. It's Saturn. Now Saturn, I have a lot of other soft, I have two minds about Saturn. I do think it can come soft. I think it can be the grandmother. I think it's that stabilizing, how do we make a civilization work for everyone? But it's not like this notion of the humanitarian. That's not that though. That's not the same thing. Like it's more Jupiter. I think that's the Jupiter coming in being like, how can everyone have, a good quality of life? How can everyone have peace and acceptance and, Jupiter goodwill? Saturn is going to run a system. They're going to tinker with a system. There's not necessarily goodwill. This is not necessarily warm and fuzzy kind of Aquarius energy. So I don't know. I think that Saturn in Aquarius is really interested in systems design, designing how things operate, the how of things operate. Uh, Saturn is edges and rules. And when you start having edges and boundaries and rules, you start making structures and objects and shapes and stuff and order. And I know that the sun also has to do with order, and Jupiter also has to do with order. I don't think any one of these planets has like the corner, the monopoly on structure and order. But when I look at Saturn, it's edges and it's boundaries and it's the word no and it's rejection. And in that, it does create some kind of structure, some kind of design or system. In air, it's not like an earthen system or structure. It's not like a brick and mortar building. It's more like an organization, So then we do get people. Like, how do all these people work in this system? But again, it's not like the notion that there's automatic goodwill or automatic like nurturing in Aquarius, like Venus, Jupiter, Moon stuff. I don't see that a lot with Aquarius. And that's how we get some of the most, and this is where my own political leanings come in, of like, looking at people across the aisle who are conservatives, they don't care about well-being. A lot of them don't give a shit about the well-being of, say, women or children, or like, it's like, I won't get too far into this, but lots of Aquarians over there. Margaret Thatcher, holy Aquarius, Batman. So this notion of like humanitarian, but like we're like more tinkering with systems. And if there's people and collateral damage, like that's where that greater good orthodoxy of Aquarius comes in and can be put to some of the most horrendous means ever in Aquarius. And I'm saying this nasty, sounds kind of nasty about Aquarius, but that's the truth of what Saturn can be when it gets really not, in my mind, not balanced. So I kind of am rejecting that note, but I'm glad that Venus is in here when all of this stuff is happening. But I guess that is my one concern. If I'm really taking off all the sugarcoating, with Pluto and Aquarius, and currently with all these planets with Pluto, it does, like, the worst case outcome for me in my mind, it feels like that for the greater good, I'm going to forsake my integrity. I'm going to forsake the means to get to the ends, no matter what. And it doesn't matter what your belief system is or who you are or whatever. That can get so corrupt and so #problematic, in my opinion, and it can end up kind of steamrolling. That's a good word for it. It's can be a bit of a steamroller in the name of whatever it believes in or thinks is like this optimized, better system of the future, Um, yeah, Aquarius. Tales of caution. Cautionary tales of Aquarius. And I just every time, sorry to get triggered. It's like every time I hear the word humanitarian and Aquarius, I keep thinking about Margaret Thatcher. I keep thinking about all these Aquarian people who are like the last people I'd be like, yeah, they're a humanitarian. No way. But that is so my personal opinion and bias. So I'm sorry if anyone has other ideas that are contrary to that. What else? Da, da. Glad I could be helpful, Lisa. Thank you. Thank you for all of your comments, everyone. This is great. Yeah, Adam Davis is talking about Venus in Aquarius. And like, yeah, like I guess if I was gonna make someone a humanitarian, if they were like Aquarius, I would look for like Venus and Jupiter or like Moon or someone who like some planet that has an awareness of like the softness and squishiness of people. Um, yeah, and of course, it's always the whole chart. But if we're just looking at Saturn in a vacuum, if we're looking at Aquarius in a vacuum, we gotta, I think, separate it. In my Hellenistic point of view, we have to start separating it from Jupiter from 11th house, because 11th house is goodwill, aspirations, hopes, dreams, friendship, groups, organizations, because Jupiter is that coalescing force that it literally signifies groups of people, Jupiter, and goodwill between people, and forgiveness and parties and good times and like hope and belief and literal aspirations. Like, so for me, like Jupiter, humanitarian, the sad hell. So I guess, maybe then that means that the Sagittarius Pisces people, I guess if you forced me to choose a sign to be humanitarians, I probably choose the Jupiter ruled people, the Jupiteriness, maybe. But all of these questions always, so it feels like I'm trying to Virgo parse out something that is too big and too complicated to be doing the Virgo treatment with, the black and white treatment with. Yeah, and last little thing about, Aquarius, and that steamrolling, uh, and I do believe, um, this comes from Austin Coppock. I feel like this was one of his examples on the astrology podcast, but talking about Aquarius as the revolutionary, where if you don't have a really stubborn mind about what you're going after, you can't overthrow a government. Like all of the most eccentric, like strong kind of leaders like that, that Aquarian kind of Uranus Venn diagram, that there is a Venn diagram there. I understand why the modern folks have that co-rulership of, or rulership of Uranus. But there is a stubbornness there with the new thing, with the new idea. Yes, I thought about it for 10 years. I can write a thesis on it. Good luck trying to change my mind. That's what I always say as my example to try to illustrate how Aquarius thinks and operates mentally. But again, just that Austin Coppockism of the revolutionary person has to be stubborn about their ideas to overthrow a government, to do that steamrolling that sometimes needs to be done. So again, so many contextual nuances to consider, but yeah, and if you have Venus and Aquarius, like I do, yeah, now these types of systems and things relate to people. And then sure, but we're under the auspices of Saturn, so we can't forget that. All right. What else? Any other configurations? Any configurations we didn't get to that anyone wanted to cover that I did not cover? Last call. Thank you so much for all of your contributions, every single one of them, all the little words, every single word in this chat thread. Thank you so much. So appreciated. And if anyone has any questions, any comments, share them below. Of course, if you need to email me, feel free to email me. It's at aligninglightastrology@gmail.com. You can find all my stuff on www.aligninglightastrology.com. I'm always doing readings, not too far scheduled out. I have discount codes. If you like discount codes, sign up for my newsletter. That's where those come in. Very rarely do I not have one in there. And I send out one newsletter a month, so I'm not spamming your inbox. And it's like the same newsletter every month, pretty much in terms of there's always a discount code, there's the dates of interest, all my events, links to my events, so you don't have to scramble around trying to find them. You can subscribe to this channel if you want to keep up with this. Please hit the like button if you did like this and got some help from it. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's it. I don't have any. I'm still just doing all this same kind of little side projects. Reading groups are still going for Chris's course. I did get a paper accepted to the Kaylee review that I'm like waiting to be published, and I don't know when it's going to be published, but I got the green light on the paper, so I'm very, very excited about it. It's going to be about empty houses and how to treat empty houses in a birth chart and with timing. So if you have empty houses, as we all do, in your chart, oh my gosh. And one last thing too, I wanted to read a quote. Uh, yeah, that was all the work stuff I had going on. Sign up for the newsletter. That's where you get the discounts. And I always have one from the astrology podcast referral list. So use the astrology code or use the code astrology podcast for 10% off all of my services. last little quote to leave us with, so important to know when we're working with transits, because I think like, or our birth charts, like anytime we're working with transits, birth charts, any kind of astrology thing, um, it's really easy to use astrology as like the perfect scaffolding for all of our hopes and fears, all of our expectations of like what we want to happen. And, I think it almost, for like me, I have a hard time not controlling the outcome. And sometimes astrology plays right into that tendency I have to try to control the outcome. Elections, anyone, like literally trying to control the outcome a little bit. So we got to be careful with that. I think that astrology can absolutely flare up expectation, fear, concern. And my favorite parable, speaking of Pisces and parables, the parable of the painted tiger and the person who was painting a tiger in their cave or on a cave wall, and they painted it so well that when they got done, they stood back and they got startled. They startled themselves from this tiger that they painted on the wall. And boy, do I notice myself doing that a lot in my life about, even if it's just like, I was just talking about not texting my mom earlier. And in my mind, I'll be like, oh, I bet, she's going to be annoyed with me or whatever. That's a painted tiger. I don't know that for sure. I haven't asked her. So I don't know for sure. That's just a painted tiger. So try to notice that and notice if astrology is adding to those. And then that might mean that there's too much astrology or we need to approach astrology differently. But there's a quote that I wanted to read that really, I think, kind of riffs on that. So it's from Jane Hirschfield. I don't even know who that is. This is from one of those quote calendars, like 365 quotes for the year. Um, and this is, again, by Jane Hirschfield. And it says, at Ryoen-ji in Kyoto, so at this place in Kyoto, there is a famous rock garden. Wherever in it a person stands, one of the 15 rocks cannot be seen. The garden reminds that always something unknowable is present, just beyond what can be perceived or comprehended, and that something is as much part of the real as any other stone amid the raked gravel. So I'm going to read that last part again. The garden reminds us these 15 rocks, where one of them at least cannot be seen at any given position in the garden. That garden reminds us that there's always something unknowable. There's always something just beyond what can be perceived or comprehended. So there's always like, just like that rock that I know is back there and I can't see it, but I know there's 15 rocks and I can only see 14 of them. Just knowing there's always that one. So with astrology, I am overwhelmed when I think about how many variables I just don't have the brain power to take into account. And, maybe someday quantum computing can help us out with this. But I think for now, just knowing my brain is a wet computer, that, remembering that as much as astrology can give us the overall shape of something, a lot of the details we will never be able to fill in. And so, if we find ourselves coming up with painted tigers based on transit stuff, just remembering that it is that even if, I can think of, okay, I know this is going to be about my money, I still am not going to, hold on to those worrisome thoughts that are going to move through my mind normally of like, oh, well, what if, or, et cetera, et cetera. So, another way of putting this is, how do you say it? Epistemic humility. And I've heard, what is it? There's a few different ways of saying it, but just kind of like with what I know, epistemology. Epistemology is like the study of how we know stuff. Where does knowledge come from? Uh, and then being humble, humility. I'm not sure. There's always something I might not know. There's always something, some variable that I'm not understanding correctly or I'm not taking into account. So I think as long as we can hold on to that, for me, that actually gives me a little bit of peace sometimes, especially I think the more we learn about astrology, actually, the more this can become a challenge. So at least for a while, there's like a hump of challenge here when we're in this learning curve of astrology of then, okay, how to hold what we're reading and what we're potentially perceiving about the future, which is absolutely wild that we can even pretend or try to do that. You know, it's wild that we get to do that here, but we have limitations. There are so many limitations to this. It's wild, but even with that, we have our limits. Okay, I'm done doing my sermonette. That is my sermonette. I wish you all so much peace for the next few weeks ahead. I have not scheduled anything. So TBD on all of the future dates about stuff. So stay tuned to that. And if you sign up for my newsletter, I will put all of those dates in your inbox. Okay, my friends,